Welcome to Schmidt List, a podcast on innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurship. Join host Kurt Schmidt, president of Foundry, as he and his guest share valuable insights and strategies. This is the perfect opportunity to explore fresh ideas to improve yourself and your business. Come join Kurt as he interviews this week's inspiring guest.
Ingrid, how are you today?
I am great. Thank you so much. How are you?
Oh, living the dream. I'm excited that you're here. So Ingrid, tell me about the work you do and who do you do it for?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So I am the president and founder of an organization called INCO International. We are a professional language service organization. So we help corporations speak to their constituents, employees, clients, et cetera, in over 200 languages.
Wow.
Via document translation and spoken interpretation services.
That's amazing. So why a book on trust? Tell me a little bit about the book and the book process. And if you're in the language business, I can imagine it makes sense to write a book, but why a book specifically on trust?
Does it ever make sense to write a book from one author to another?
Well, you know.
Right? The things we do. Well, yes. I'm going to start by telling you a little story, and then I'll kind of work my way around to your questions. A couple of weeks after I graduated from college, I had started a job as a freelance Spanish interpreter. And it was my very first job. I walked into Children's Hospital and I was petrified. I was nervous. My knees were shaking. I had sweat rolling down the back of my neck. And I had no idea what in the heck I was doing, really. And I walked in and there's this beautiful baby girl crying in the arms of her parents. And they were so confused. I had no idea what was going on. The doctor was confused. He couldn't communicate with the family. And the minute that I started interpreting, I could instantly see their faces calm and collected because all of a sudden they could understand. And I knew that in that moment that I had created this bond of trust without really even thinking about it. Mm-hmm. And from that very first moment, that really drove me to start to question what is really at the heart of language services. Why do we do what we do? And it's a complicated, complex question. It's a complicated, complex industry. But the one thread that has remained consistent over the past 25 plus years is this concept of trust. And so I found myself, as we often do, having these conversations with myself saying, gosh, I really think I would like to spend a little more time diving into trust. What does it mean? Doing some research, talking to people. So finally I listened to those nudges that became, screams in the back of my head and dove into the book writing process.
That's great. And I'm sure it was a super fun experience, right? But challenging, right?
Joyful.
Yep.
It was fun. As you know, it took me about a year from start to finish, lots of hours. There are many times when I would just throw my hands up and say, I got no words left. I don't know. I have no idea what I'm saying here. Right. Yep. But then you dig in and you finish it up.
That's great. So, well, let's talk about trust and language and all those things a little bit. So I coach a lot of people in leadership positions and people who are interested in becoming leaders. And a lot of times, I start, especially with younger people, I start with telling them, you've got to build trust with your team. You've got to build trust with leadership. And every once in a while, maybe more often than I would like, they seem to have an attitude of some version of, well, they should just inherently trust me. Like, what's wrong with them that they don't trust me? Why do I have to go that extra mile there? What would be your response?
Well, my response is trust is a two-way street. We all walk around with a lifetime of experiences and things that have happened to us, things that have not happened to us. And we can't possibly know what all those experiences are. But I do know that trust exists on a continuum. It doesn't turn on and off. It is something that you have to continuously work for. You have to continuously strive for. And it's bilateral. And it requires a lot of work from both people. Because if they are invested in the relationship and they care about the relationship, they have to invest in trust creation. There is no way to go about it. But I will say this, and this is a slight deviation from your question, Kurt, is that for trust to even exist in an individual, it has to start by trusting the self. If you can't trust yourself, you can't possibly even know what it would be like to trust anybody else. And I think that that's probably one of the greater challenges that we're facing as a society, is that we don't know how to trust ourselves because we don't know what information is true. We hear all these things. Our voices are telling us all these crazy things in our head, and we don't know what's true, what's not true. And it's a challenge. It's a really big challenge for us to really step into that mode of being able to trust, to turn on that trust meter, if you will.
Yeah, and that dives into the subject of vulnerability, which is where I see that block coming from people. Yes, they don't know who they are, but they also don't like the idea of opening themselves up and making themselves vulnerable, because yes, trust is a two-way street, but somebody has to get on the street first and to start the two-way actually going. And that person usually has to be a bit more comfortable with vulnerability. Do you agree with that?
I agree with that. And you have to want to, right? You have to want to. And so if you're invested in, let's say, a young leader in their career and they want to grow, they want to expand their leadership capabilities, they want to have further career advancements, they want to take their job to the next level. So they have to want to learn how to lean into these skills. And trust is not something that's always innate for a lot of people. I do think that there are trusting people, and I think that there are people that find it a little bit harder to trust. But again, that's bringing that whole lifetime of experiences and history into any given situation to really kind of level set your ability to trust. But you have to want to. It starts with a desire. It always has to start with a desire to want to do that.
Yeah. And the only way that I've seen people grow in their careers is by building trust with other people. And so again, back to breaking it down, if we break it down to, and it's the same advice I give business owners, right? Which is if you can't personally grow, you can't grow your business. Those two things don't go together. So it's the same thing when it comes to career. You can't grow a career until you're growing yourself, right? It can't just be, well, I'm just good and people should just recognize that I'm good. And why don't they see that?
Yeah, well, even the best people have work to do constantly. It's my working theory that we should all hope to become a better version of ourselves every single day, but hope is not enough. We have to actually work to make it happen and figure out really what are the most important things and how am I going to move the needle here. So yeah, I agree with you on that one.
Yeah, hope is not a plan. That's my
hope is not a plan.
Hope is not a plan, but hope is great. I love hope, but it's not a zero-sum game. It's not a plan. You've got to have a plan.
Exactly.
So let's talk about, maybe I am that younger leader, or maybe I'm somebody who's moving into a leadership position. What are some tactics I can do to start building trust that you've seen work? So maybe I am working on myself. I feel like I've got the right mindset, Ingrid. What are some tactics I can employ with the individuals around me to start building trust? What would you say to that? What would be your advice?
So something that you hinted on before is something that I do think is worth bringing up again, which is key right now, and that's vulnerability. People want to know who they're working with, who they're working for, who is leading them. They want to know you. I think that is one of the unique traits about being human, is that we want to build meaningful relationships. We want to know people. And the only way to do that is to really open up and become a vulnerable person. And that doesn't mean sharing every aspect of your life. I think there's this general misunderstanding of, well, what the heck is vulnerability?
Yeah, where's the line, Ingrid?
Yeah, where is the line, right? There's a professional line. You don't have to walk around sharing everything, but open up and have meaningful discussions, have meaningful conversations. Don't be afraid to speak your truth, because I'm sure you've recognized this in your career or in life in general. Everything that you're feeling, even though you feel like you're alone and you're on a desert and nobody could ever feel that way, I promise you that almost everybody around you feels the same way.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
But we hide it from each other because we don't talk about the things that are challenging, or our feelings or our emotions. And I think that if we allow ourselves the freedom and the flexibility and the space to get a little bit vulnerable and open up and start sharing those deeper parts of ourselves and our emotions, then I think you'll see that trusting two-way highway, as you will, starts to really flourish and starts to flow.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's Nietzsche said like the idea of shame, right? So judgment, right? Being judged by people. Yeah. If you can remove shame, you can truly become who you are, because it's shame that keeps us pretending to be other people or putting on some sort of airs, things like that. Like you said, working on yourself and being the most you can be. And part of that is understanding shame and how that shapes you and how you can either let it control you or you can try to wrestle with it. Because I just like you said, I don't want people to judge me, Ingrid. If I put myself out there, what if they say they don't like that about me and they don't like me anymore? Then what do I do?
Yeah. Well, I would say that their opinion of you is none of your concern. But, it's easier said than done, right? If it's your boss, then you probably want to be liked. But I'm going to go back to your point. You keep dripping these good points. Shame is absolutely paralyzing. Shame will take a hold on you like nothing else will. But what I know from my research into shame and from my own experience is that you shed a light on shame and it dissipates.
Mm-hmm.
It goes away.
Yep. If you really focus on it.
If you just have an ounce of courage to speak it, it usually it loses its power over you. It no longer can hold you captive. So I think that that's something really important. But yeah, what do you do if people don't like you? Well, first of all, I don't know. That's their problem, not yours, for sure. But that said, there's nothing. Well, there are things. There are a few things that a quality conversation that is met with great intention by both parties, that a little bit of I don't like you can't fix, right? But both parties really have to be invested in trying to improve that relationship and trying to improve the communication. It all comes down to communication at the end of the day. And I think we know that. It's funny that the relationships that seem to matter most are the relationships where sometimes communication can fall down the most, right? I mean, if you think about even in our personal relationships, family relationships, relationships with managers, the people that we care about the most are the ones that we typically tend to falter the most.
Yeah. And those are the people that we really want to impress moreover than just the regular person driving by on the street, right? Those are the people that we're invested in. And so I think that's the hard thing, is understanding that this is a journey. It's not just you try it once and, well, that didn't work, so I'm never doing that again. You've got to build, it's like muscles. You've got to kind of build it up, right?
Absolutely. And I like to think of it again as a continuum. It doesn't turn on and off. Trust takes constant work, constantly dripping those little steps along the way of open and honest communication and early communication, and really taking the time to build, to set up the foundation so that when the top starts to tumble a little bit, you've got that strong foundation and you've got the trust established. Because we know that stuff is going to happen. It's life. Like, you can't stop the stuff from happening. Yeah. All the stuff. It's always going to happen. And all you can do is really try to lean back into that strong foundation that you've taken the time to establish before it's too late.
And that's the advice in a way that I give leaders, where if they want a team, one of the biggest mistakes I made early on in my career is that I wanted, as a leader, I wanted everybody to like me and be friends with me, which was a terrible disaster. It was bad. But I learned over time that, especially with the leaders that I coach these days, is that if you truly want innovative team members who are looking for new opportunities to improve not only their job and their businesses, they have to have a trusting relationship with you to have that, to get that guidance. And where that starts sometimes is being that vulnerable leader and saying, these are areas that I could be working on. And if you share with your employee or your team member areas that you think you can have for improvement, you're almost opening the door and saying, this is a safe place for you to talk about areas that you want to improve on. And the more that you can slowly build on that relationship over time, I guarantee you're going to get a much happier person who's working with you, a person who you have more loyalty and trust overall with, but also they're going to be more engaged, I feel, in their job.
Yeah. I mean, engagement is one of the key drivers in employee productivity for sure, but also makes one of the biggest impacts on the bottom line, right? We know that employee engagement is worse than people quitting. Lack of engagement is where, like, if you're going to not be engaged, it's better to just not be there because it costs the company more money and you're just damaging everything from the inside out.
Well, and you're putting your career on hold too.
Yeah. And it can't feel good. Like, we want to be successful. We want to be productive. Most people, I think it's a human part of human nature. And if you're not, you just feel bad.
Yeah. And yeah, because everybody wants to grow. Everybody wants to keep improving and growing. And but that, like you said, I think back to what you originally said, to keep that growth going, it starts by looking internally and figuring out, what can I be doing to improve? What can I be doing to grow, versus relying on all the outside forces to provide you that growth, which is something I've seen in the past with folks. Have you seen that? Where they're...
I can't say that I've necessarily seen that, but that's an interesting observation. And that it's your job to help me grow, where like I can provide the water, right? I can provide the Miracle Grow or whatever, but it's up to you to grow. Like you got to do the work. Like, I can't get in there and make the cells do what they do. So it's, we have to.
I see it in more people that are in very large companies, where it happens, where the company is providing everything. They'll pick up your car and do the oil change. They provide you all your benefits. They have sous chefs in the cafeteria, and it becomes that job that is really part of defining who you are as a person, because because again, it's like now you're relying more on the organizational growth of the company and how the benefits and things that they're providing versus what you're out there trying to do for yourself and what you're trying to bring to yourself, which is one reason why I wrote the book on networking, because you can't just rely on the business and place that you're in to provide you with your career and the opportunities to grow and enhance your career.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds a little bit like enablement, which is not necessarily a great place to fall into. But, in my opinion, the picking up a little bit on the networking, there really truly is no better way to establish yourself and to continue to better yourself as an individual, professionally and personally, and in that really strong networking. And we need people. Human beings need community. We are community-driven beings, if you will.
Yes.
And we need constant conversation, and we need meaningful relationships, not just surface relationships. And networking that's one of the key ways for you to make that happen.
Yeah. Well, what advice would you give, Ingrid, if I do have a boss that I'm struggling with my communication with, and I want to build trust with them, before I just quit or try to moved to a different department or something? What would be your advice for me to start building trust? What should I try?
Well, this is not rocket science, but it takes time. It takes time, and it takes communication, and it takes attention. And so that person also has to be willing to commit to the betterment of the relationship. And they have to commit to open and honest and early conversation and communication, and commit to being vulnerable, commit to being honest, commit to a certain level of authenticity so that both people meet each other in the middle, right? You can't just keep pushing at a door that's locked and it's just never going to open. That's not fair either. And my guess is that one of my working theories is, if there is something about someone else that has bothered me in my life, right? Like that person does this or that, and I want to complain about it 9% of the time, those are the things about myself that I need to fix. And so it's really easy for us to point fingers and say, she did this, she did that, he's this, he's that. But if we just flip the mirror and take a look at ourselves, oftentimes we realize that, oh, hey, we're not perfect either.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of this is also our fault. And
Yep.
so where did that downfall in communication go? How did that relationship get askew? Really, what happened? And I'm not saying that all people are good people and that
No,
there couldn't be other extenuating circumstances. But in a great majority of the time, it takes just as much internal effort as it does external to fix that relationship.
yeah, and I think that's key. Is that then you're being intentional, right? You're not just leaving it up to the phases of the moon to hopefully affect.
You mean that doesn't work?
I don't know. I mean, I do know some people, if they charge their crystals, they might have a better week. Absolutely. But for me, starting with that, exactly what you just described, is being intentional and doing a deeper dive into me. Is there aspects that's happening with this relationship with this person that are a reflection on me? And what are ways that I can improve on that? And then also just having an intentional conversation with that person and just calling out the elephant in the room, if you will, because you might think it's a big deal. They might not even know this is even happening. This is all in your head, that there's this strife, and they're like going about their day like doop, 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 doop. Yeah. And you might say to them, hey, I want to really work at building our relationship. I feel like it's not as trusting and close-knit as possible. You'd be surprised at how many times that other person's like, what? Like, oh, I had no idea that you felt this way. And you're like, how could you not feel this way? I've felt this way for years, So,
well,
I think it goes back to what you said.
Right. Yeah. We're all bringing a lifetime of history behind us. Who knows what that person, their life might be falling apart. They might have any number of tragedies in their life that is causing them to not see beyond the reality of the tragic, the tragic situation in their life. So
it's all about me, Ingrid. It's all about me.
Well, I know it is. It's all about me too.
Oh, right. That's right. Apparently that's the two-way street, isn't it? Right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. It makes a lot of sense. So Ingrid, last question I want to ask you about is that if you were to give some advice on resources and places where I can work on this skill set for building trust more so, what would your suggestion be? Is it books, therapy, hot yoga? Like what have you found personally or seen other people find that helps them sort of start to work on this journey?
Well, I would say a little bit of all of the above. This is going to sound real cliche because everybody talks about it, but establishing a strong foundation in your morning routine, I think, is one of the best ways to set yourself up for a successful, peaceful, and calm day. You got to carve out a little bit of time for yourself to get your head clear, to get the cobwebs out, to set an intention, to find at least one thing to be grateful for, and you will be blown away by how much better your day flows. And listen, I know I'm pulled in a million different directions myself. I know that we've got screaming kids and dogs that are puking and barking at the UPS driver and, I don't know, plumbing emergencies and any number of things. And I get it. But for just one moment, you've got to learn to take care of yourself, because all of that other stuff will just pile and pile and pile and pile. And then you're not good to anybody. You can't help anybody. You can't help yourself. You certainly can't help anyone else. And so you really got to find a way to do that. And whether or not you have and I would say it is a little bit of a luxury. Can you go to hot yoga? For a lot of people, they can't, right? That's just not in their lifestyle, or it's just not going to fit. Can you? And if you can, I would say, yeah, heck yeah. Read all the books, go to all the therapy, go to the hot yoga, put beautiful crystals charging in the moon all around your house, do all the stuff, fill yourself with really healthy, nutritious food, get all the good sleep, move every day. All the stuff that we hear about all the time. They were like, do we really have to do that? Can't we just sit on the couch and watch Netflix all day and get better?
Yeah, let's do that.
Friends, that's just not how it's going to go.
You're absolutely right. Again, back to being intentional, right? If we wanted to live a more fulfilling life, we have to be intentional about it. We can't wait that hopefully the inspiration will strike us and then it'll just happen, right? That's not a light switch It won't flip on.
Yeah. Well, nobody's ever going to come to your front door with a little box saying, here's your inspiration. Your life is going to be so much better now.
Is that a monthly subscription for that somewhere?
No.
Okay. All right. Well, either way, Ingrid, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day to spend with me and my audience and sharing the work that you do. So if I want to find a book and I want to find out more about the work you do, where do I go? Where do I find this stuff?
Yes. Well, The Language of Trust is available on all major book outlets, including Amazon and Target and all the places. You just type in The Language of Trust and you'll find it. Also available at Ingrid-Christensen.com. There's lots of information about the book writing process, different blogs and articles, etc. And you just type in Ingrid Christensen in Google and it pops up. Now there's 3 of us, which is interesting.
Really?
One is an Arctic explorer.
That's really surprising.
One is an impressionist painter, and one is me.
I think you're in good company.
I'm not the painter. I'm not the Arctic explorer. So yeah, I would love to meet the other Ingrid Christensens at some point. So we're out there.
You could all write a painting, exploring trust book. It'd be great. Gold. It's gold. All right, Ingrid. Thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate you and the work that you do.
Thank you so much.
We appreciate you taking the time to listen to this episode of Schmidt List. The stories shared by our guests are genuinely inspiring and offer insightful knowledge. It's important to remember that success doesn't happen overnight and requires collaboration, learning, and perseverance. If you want to broaden your professional connections, check out Kurt's book, The Little Book of Networking: How to Build Your Career One Conversation at a Time, on Amazon. Please stay connected with all things Schmidt List on social media, leave a review for the podcast, and join our community of like-minded entrepreneurs. Thank you for being part of Schmidt List. Keep innovating, collaborating, and chasing your entrepreneurial dreams.